Right. Okay, so as I said, this is really going to be just sort of a background of WDS, where we came from, where we are now, what the immediate future might be, to give you some ideas maybe about where WDS might be able to contribute. So, starting with a very brief history, the International Council for Science is now the International Science Council, and I'll mention a bit more about that later. It's one of the oldest non-governmental organisations in the world, and it's got a mission to strengthen international science for the benefits of society. As part of that, it basically took on the role to create one of the first data sharing initiatives in the world. So in the International Geophysical Year in 1957-1958, it coordinated the establishment of two bodies, one to look after the data outputs and one to build on those data outputs with products. So the World Data Centre is the Federation of Astronomical Geophysical Analysis Services. And then what's then known as the Fourth International Polar Year, if you count IGY as the third. It was co-sponsored in 2007-2008 by ICSU and the WMO. And it was much bigger. It included the social sciences, the health sciences for the first time. And it's probably a lesson to be learnt with the UN decade that basically the idea was that they envisioned an integrated data information system building on what already existed, which in this case was the WDCs and the FAGs. But unfortunately, this didn't really work for the basic reason it wasn't an integrated system. And it had gaps in the disciplinary and geographical coverage. And while most of the big data sets were safe and fine, there was a loss of a lot of the data sets from the long tail of science, and most of those are gone forever. So basically, ICSU then in October 2008 went back to the drawing board and said, we still want to have a leadership role when it comes to scientific data and information. And so it created the World Data System. And the idea was that they had a strategy. Their long-term vision is a world where excellence in science is effectively translated into policy-making and socio-economic development. In such a world, universal and equitable access to scientific data and information is a reality. So this is where WDS came in. This was the WDS mission. And so, WDS now. Well, let's start first things first. So, WDS has a scientific committee. The scientific committee, the current one, was put in place in July last year. It's chaired by Sandy Harrison, who you can see up there in the top left. And it's also worth mentioning that the young lady in the bottom right is Alice Fremont. She's part of our ECR, Early Career Researcher Network, so we're trying to really get the next generation of scientists into the scientific committee. So, the goals. What's WDS about? Well, as you can guess from the strategy that ICSU put out, the first things first, universal equitable access to quality assured scientific data, data services, products and information, ensuring long-term data stewardship, fostering compliance to agreed upon data standards and conventions, so helping interoperability, and providing mechanisms to facilitate and improve access to data and data products. This is really operationalized in our strategic targets. We've literally, in the last week, I think it is, put out our strategic plan for 2019 to 2023. We've taken the 5 strategic targets we had and really put them down to 3 core targets. Improve the trusting and quality of open scientific data services, nurture active disciplinary and multidisciplinary scientific data services communities, and make trusted data services an integral part of international collaborative scientific research. And the strategic targets and the goals are backed up by data sharing principles. We don't have a data policy anymore. We have principles because there are many, many policies out there that people have to follow. And we would rather not add yet another policy, but have a set of principles instead. These were put together by a data ethicist, so someone who's really at the crux of creating these kind of principles. And you'll see it's about full and openly shared according to whatever laws and ethical research conduct. It's about making data available, minimum time delay, free of charge. Obviously, free of charge doesn't necessarily absolutely have to mean free. It can be that you obviously recover the costs of dissemination, however we want to describe that, but you might still hopefully waive that for lower income user communities for helping equity and access. We obviously want to ensure the authenticity, the quality, the integrity of data are preserved, and also citation, making sure that those who are stewarding the data are really acknowledged. And also, yes, you might need, for whatever reason, to make something sensitive or restricted, but it has to have appropriate justification and should still be made as open as possible. And at the crux, WDS is a member organisation, and WDS members are trustworthy scientific data services, and they cover the whole gamut of the data lifecycle. And where are we now? Well, we've got 76 regular members, and they're basically data stewards, data analysis services, and they're certified as trusted data repositories. We have 11 network members. They're umbrella bodies of those of the regular members. We have 10 partners who contribute some maybe contribution in some way, whether that's financial or support services, and 19 associates interested in the WDS endeavour. And that's the map as it stands. You'll see there's big gaps in the LAC region and in Africa, which we're trying to address through various workshops and other projects. It doesn't really fully represent WDS membership in that the network members are shown just by where their secretariat is. So obviously those 11 network members will have a much larger footprint. The kind of domains, well, WDS came with a fully multidisciplinary mission. This is very old now, so I can say with certainty that probably the balance is getting better, but you can see really because of the history, it dominated by the earth sciences, the space sciences. But we are getting more and more humanities, social science members, and so probably the balance is changing in here now. And I really should update that to reflect it. Now, one important thing here to say is WDS originally certified both its regular and network members. The regular members are now actually certified under a new certification scheme. It's the Core Trust Seal Trustworthy Data Repository certification. Now, one of the reasons that this is important as much as anything else is that the quality management framework that IODE adopted that was linked with the WDS membership now doesn't quite fit as well as it used to. So this is something that we need to think about maybe in the future, but it's just worth mentioning. And in all honesty, I could give you a full presentation just on the Core Trust Seal, so I'm going to just skip over the details, but suffice to say, it brought together WDS and the Data Seal of Approval, which were two communities looking at the core level of certification, and we've created a set of trustworthy requirements, trustworthy data repository requirements, 16 of them that look at the context, the organizational infrastructure, digital object management, technology. And at the moment, it says 45. In the last few days, we've certified a few more. We're getting close to the 50 mark. And important in this room is to say that IODE is a network member of WDS, and here's some regular members that are probably more important to the people in this room. Flanders Marine Institute Data Center, the World Data Service for Oceanography, WDC Oceanography Tianjin, and WDC Oceanography Obninsk. It's worth saying that the regular members are all undergoing their recertification at the moment. So all of them are officially, their memberships have expired. Officially, they're no longer considered trustworthy data repositories under this certification, but they're all working through it at various different stages. IODE probably also has to go through a renewal recertification fairly soon. Network membership is still purely under WDS, and I probably need to talk with Peter about that, but I've been a bit slow on my side, so that's my fault. I don't expect people to be able to read this, but I wanted to give an idea of the sort of members that we have and say that obviously a lot of them are connected not only with oceanography, but you can't say that obviously the oceans, as we know, are isolated. So there's a lot of capacity within the membership, a lot of things that the members that would be an important part probably of the UN decade beyond just pure oceanography. But we've got the NASA DACs, including in the room, and DAC in the NASA sense, not in the sense of what we've just heard. And I can say we've got representatives of the Ocean Biology DAC in the room. I can also say that not quite a member yet, but the Norwegian Marine Data Centre is also in the room. They're close to being a WDS member, are certified under the Core Trust seal. So that's so important to know, and this is just a big list. So that's just what 90 members look like. This is more important to say. In April last year, and WDS established an international technology office. It is hosted in Canada by the University of Victoria by 3 WDS members, Ocean Networks Canada, the Canadian Astronomy Data Centre, the Canadian Cryosphere Information Network Polar Data Catalogue. And in November last year, Karen Payne became the Associate Director, and she's beginning just to get into her role now and kind of work out exactly how best she can serve the community. But it's worth saying we now have a technology component. And the idea of this component is it really will manage WDS's contribution. It will integrate that contribution as forming part of global research data infrastructure. Karen will be involved in all the sort of more technical working groups that we have under RDA, the Research Data Alliance, and so on and so forth. Some projects that WDS is working on that may or may not be of interest. We have the Scholarly Link Exchange, which is an interoperability framework for exchanging information about the links between scholarly literature and data. So this has been 2 working groups. The second one has just finished under the Research Data Alliance and is making some good waves. So if you have an interest, let me know and I can point you in the right direction. Assessment of data fitness for use. This is kind of connected with the fair data principles. Obviously, if you know about fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, it's really at the data set level. And this is kind of thinking about some of those ideas at the data set level that might be an additional part of the Core Trust Seal certification. Non-standard outputs. It's been increasingly recognized that data are not the only thing that are important when it comes to the integrity of science. And so WDS is beginning to think about what other outputs, and especially focusing digital outputs here, because we're the World Data System, might need to be checked, certified in terms of the sort of repositories. We put out a survey. It basically mainly was answered by our members. We wanted a bigger pool of people answering. But WDS was basically told that we should provide some thought leadership on this, but we shouldn't necessarily be the ones going out certifying all of these other types of repositories. There's still some thinking to be done about this. And other things that might be of interest to the room, we have a knowledge network metadata catalog, so obviously, thank you very much. There's the IODE, so there's some connectivity there between what IODE is doing and what WDS wants to do with its membership. We're also starting to think about data at risk. Again, WDS is really about creating sort of communities of excellence. However, there is a path leading from repositories that are created because someone has an interest in whatever, you know, some tiny part of the scientific scheme, but still important, and making sure that that gets on a path towards being held within a trusted data repository. And we have various levels of training that we're beginning to progress, including for early career researchers, and more about sort of membership maturity as well. Now, the future is uncertain. In July last year, ICSU and the International Social Science Council merged as the International Science Council, global non-governmental organisation representing both natural and social sciences. It is the largest, I think, as far as I'm aware, the largest scientific non-governmental organisation in the world. But it's not very clear at the moment where organisations like WDS will fit into this. We're an interdisciplinary body. ISSC did not have an equivalent, and it's not clear at the moment how organisations like WDS will fit in. And part of the reason for that is that the ISC is still working out its strategy. It's still working out what it wants to do. But it's put out a public document late last year that at least identified some strategic challenge domains, and you'll see that the digital revolution is one of those. So, yeah. And the evolution of science and science systems. So these are important things where WDS probably has a role. And so again, I'm here to find out what inputs, guidance, support WDS can give to the UN Decade of the Ocean. And thank you. And there's an advert for our Asia Oceania conference, which will be held in May this year. Thank you very much.